Okay, hello everyone. Now, in this second part of the lecture on Singapore case study, we are going to continue with the various means in which the Singapore government, PAP government, had tried to maintain stability using criterion 2. All right, and so remember, it's still a maximum government. All right, so yes, they still try to use constitutional processes and elections, right? But there are still some elements which places it under a maximum government. Okay, so you see later on. Okay, and yet even though they have been very successful, generally a very positive case study in maintaining stability, right, as a maximum government, okay, we do see popular backlash, okay, which is the decline in popular votes in the 1980s. Okay, then we need to see like how the Singapore government responded to it, and then over here it is also a success case study, all right, in terms of like after the government responded to the emerging challenge, all right, from loss in popular support in the 1980s, right, we see that they managed to reverse this trend of decline in popular vote. All right, so again, it's positive throughout for this case study. Okay, so let's start. Continuing with the strategies that the PAP government under Lee Kuan Yew had come up with, okay, to maintain stability using criterion 2. Okay, so let's continue looking at the kind of both coercive and non-coercive measures to maintain its power. All right, so this will be the definition, okay, of what I mean by coercive and non-coercive. Okay, so let's start. So the coercive one would be the use of ISA. So there's the Internal Security Act. Okay, so it's a use of force or the threat of the use of force. Okay, so even after many years after the 1963 Operation Cold Store, right? Okay, the ISA was also used once again in 1987. Okay, to arrest 22 Catholics. Okay, in this Marxist conspiracy. All right, so therefore, even till the 1980s, okay, the PAP government still maintained that there might be still some remnants of a communist threat in Singapore. Okay, and then we also have another example of Francis Seow. Okay, so he used to be a Solicitor General and President of Law Society, and yet he was also detained under the ISA because there was he disagreed, all right, with how things were run, and in terms of like the judiciary okay, under PAP government. Okay, and he subsequently fled into exile to the States, and he kind of like never came back home to Singapore, and he's already passed on. Okay, so this short video is like a trailer for a movie, all right, presenting alternative views, okay, from the perspective of the people who were arrested in this so-called Marxist conspiracy. So I guess that's the beauty of history for you, all right. So we constantly look at alternative voices, different points of view, okay, and then we see and yet, we have this like so-called official version of events, and we all know that like so-called history is written by the victors, right? Okay, so therefore, as historians, we are definitely interested in alternative views, but we also must be careful. Okay, that's why we also learn source-based skills, right? In applying our source-based skills, okay, of checking author's intention, reliability, credibility, and all that. All right, in order for us to ascertain, who is actually telling the truth. Okay, and then we will try our best to try to approximate or try to come up with some kind of judgment. Okay, so this is the work of historian, and we are trying to do this in our essays right now. Okay, but if you are so interested, right, you can definitely pursue this later on at university or even beyond. Okay, so let's watch this trailer presenting an alternative perspective of the 1987 so-called Marxist conspiracy.
They came in the middle of the night.
I was asleep. I think about 4 a.m. in the morning.
Very loud banging.
It was
A very terrifying experience. Are you a Marxist? I said, no. And before I knew it, he whacked me across the face.
And he gave me one hard punch on the abdomen. Wow, that was really painful.
If we have in any way maltreated or ill-treated or tortured any of the detainees, file a police report, bring us to court, the courts can decide. They have not taken it up. We don't ill-treat people, we don't beat people. In fact, the detainees who came out said they were well treated, said that not only to the domestic press, but to the foreign press. And one of the mothers said, my daughters put on weight.
Okay, so if you're so interested, you can I think the whole movie is actually available on YouTube as well, so we can access it if you're free and after watching all the lecture videos, please. Priorities. Okay, so therefore that's a very coercive measure. That's kind of like the worst thing that the government can do to you, like arrest you in the middle of the night, okay, under ISA, and then you're arrested without trial, you know, you're detained without trial, and they can detain you kind of like, yeah, forever. And they have cause to do that, especially if they use the ISA. Okay, so that's the worst. Okay, so let's move at a more you know, friendly approaches, all right, and strategies that the PAP government have to maintain political stability. Okay, so they can use legislation, they can create new structures and policies, and they can also co-opt them. So basically trying to win so-called bright minds, all right, and very open, outspoken, you know, liberals and academics, okay, trying to co-opt them into the system. Okay, so therefore definitely still, you know, leveraging on the expertise and the academic expertise and you know, seeking the advice and all that, all right, but within the system, and therefore they will not emerge as like potential challengers to the PAP. Okay, so we have you have David Marshall. So after David Marshall was being ousted from power, right? Because remember Lee Kuan Yew challenged him in the 1959 elections, right? He was offered a position as ambassador of France. Okay, so therefore, yes, then he went to become an ambassador, okay, spreading the goodwill of Singapore, I guess, right, and doing a great job. Then we also have Professor Tommy Koh and Professor Chan Heng Chee. So both of them, they're excellent academics, they're very bright brains, and have done very well in serving Singapore's foreign policy and all that, okay, and in academic institutions throughout these years. Okay, so trying to co-opt them, okay, into the system. Okay, so they also dismantled, the PAP government also dismantled trade unions to depoliticize the populace and to reduce the influence of the Borisist socialists. Earlier I've mentioned that in the early years, okay, 1960s, 50s, 60s, all right, it's actually the trade union and the student unions, right, they have been kind of infiltrated by the left wing, okay, by so-called communists. Okay, so therefore they became very radicalized, and therefore you see a lot of like demonstrations and strikes, okay, from trade unions as well as the student body, like even like Nanyang University or some secondary schools. Okay, so therefore they are definitely a threat, all right, because they can potentially become like a centrifugal threat. Okay, so that's why it's imperative for the PAP government, right, to reduce the influence and to dismantle them. Okay, so in place, what PAP created, right, was this new thing called, which all very familiar and love, all right, NTUC. Okay, so basically this will be the government approved, okay, version of trade unions, okay, and they created this wonderful tripartite alliance, okay, so between the government, NTUC, and the National Wage Council. So NTUC will represent the workers, the National Wage Council will represent the employers, and of course the government. So therefore, with this tripartite alliance, the PAP government was a brilliant, you know, move by them lah. So to switch from, you know, labor relations, bring a potential source of instability, right, because of strikes and all that, right, it became a source of stability, okay, because of this cooperation, okay, and therefore, you know, they work together, they cooperate, and they work together for the common good and all that, okay, give and take and all that, okay, and all this, right, it will contribute to you know, very stable labor relations. Okay, and then definitely this will be a very conducive environment for foreign investments to come in and thrive and do very well. All right, so this was very important, like precondition for economic growth and development. Okay, and this will also contribute, okay, to continued legitimacy for the PAP. So this is a brilliant move, okay, on the part of PAP. All right, so this was the situation before, you know, the PAP tried to control the trade unions. Okay, so we have like various strikes, it's kind of common, okay, and the PAP government have to come down very harshly on them because they have a very like very radicalized, okay, and a very strident, you know, labor union, okay, in trade unions, okay, in all the major companies and all that. Okay, so it's really trying to tackle them one by one. Okay, and then it's all coalescing under NTUC, this new political structure that's created by the government. Okay, next, okay, again, relating to racial harmony, all right, I guess race is always a very sensitive touch point in Singapore. Okay, so it's very important to manage this, for the government to manage this, so that it doesn't like backfire on them or become a source of like political challenge. Okay, so therefore, you know, the government under the MHRA, right? So we created this Presidential Council on Minorities. Okay, and then we also have the ethnic integration policy by the HDB. Okay, so this is something that in recent years have been challenged by the Workers' Party, saying that there are some kind of like some kind of unforeseen negative consequences because some of the minorities found that they were not able to sell their flats, right? It's kind of not fair to them. Okay, so therefore there's this debate about how whether they need to like revisit this the so-called sacred cow, right? And because it's one of the tenets of our like so-called multiracialism, right? It started very early on. Okay, so this is a current development that's going on. Okay, but back then when it was first introduced, okay, it was meant to manage racial relations so that we don't have like ethnic enclaves, all right? So our neighbors can be from anywhere. Okay, so basically the big question is, once we have all these strategies, whether it's coercive or non-coercive, okay, of the PAP government in trying to maintain stability, right, using criterion 2, how do we prove that these policies have been successful? So a positive case study is very easy to prove. Okay, a negative case study is very easy to prove because you have popular uprising. That's the litmus test, remember? So the positive case study, right, is at the opposite law. Absence of racial riots. So like since 1969, no more racial riots, whatever. All right, so that would be a very clear testament, okay, to the success of the ability of the PAP government to maintain political stability. Okay, I couldn't get they might be very secretive, but I kind of couldn't really find a more recent one. Okay, but here as an example in 2012, okay, of this very highly select Presidential Council on Minorities. Okay, so at the same time, the government also tried to control the press. Okay, whether it is our Singapore press holdings or even in terms of like foreign journals. Okay, so I guess it's a way for them to control public discourse, and now we have a lot of information being online as well, so maybe that's a new frontier. Okay, so more examples, grassroots. These are all like things that are part and parcel of our everyday life. Okay, so just sharing with you so that you know that they're actually an instrument, okay, in which the government uses, okay, to maintain political stability. Okay, so we have grassroots organizations. Okay, so basically it's a way to touch base with ground sentiment, with the regular folks. All right. Okay, even the weekly Meet the People session by MPs, all right? So from the very beginning, Lee Kuan Yew maintained that even though you are like, defense minister or even you are a prime minister yourself, okay, once a week, you have to make time, okay, to meet your constituents, all right, and to work for them, okay? So that's how you actually maintain your heart and mind on the ground, okay, and to continue to, reconnect with the people, all right? And the civil service, yes. Okay, so right now, a lot of even our like perhaps the next prime minister, okay, he was also from the civil service as well. Okay, so therefore it became a very important conduit in which bright talents, okay, were identified, okay, and asked to serve in politics for PAP, of course. Okay, so this is a public service announcement, right? So remember, this Potong Pasir Meet the People session, right? The venue is actually at the PCF kindergarten that's just opposite the canal, opposite our school. Right, so if you have any issues, like for example, you have too many lecture videos to watch, cannot finish a tutorial, maybe you can ask this MP to ask for help. Okay, just saying. Okay, so let's look at the role of the military. Okay, still at criterion 2. Okay, because we're talking about whether the military has been like a threat to political structure. Okay, in the context of Southeast Asia. Well, our military is one of a national army, a national citizen army. Okay, we have national conscription, NS. Okay, and yes, the military in Singapore did contribute to political stabilities in the following ways. So the first one, there's this August 1969 NDP. So it's like just after the 1969 KL riots, okay, in July, so the next month, okay, so immediately Lee Kuan Yew ordered the SAF to display their tank. So this was an example of the awe-inspiring tank, okay, that would convince the world and Singaporeans that we are sufficiently resilient to withstand any external pressure. So that's the tank, okay. Another example in which the military was very important to political stability in Singapore would be, it was actually a bridge. Okay, so the same as the civil service. Okay, so it's a testing ground or a way to identify bright talents, okay, to join politics. Okay, so I hope you remember, recognize the individuals here. Okay, in the first incarnation, they were from the military. Okay, so definitely the military played a major role, but not a dominant one. So they do play a major role in a political structure, in supporting the political structure, in supporting. Okay, they do not like overtake, they do not dominate. Okay, so let's compare the role of the military then, okay, with what we know of the role of the military in the previous case studies. Okay, so therefore this one is not, yeah, you can write down in your notes, all right, where we try to compare across the case studies. So when we talk about the military, right, we always want to ask ourselves, was the military a major influencing factor in maintaining political stability? Okay, so therefore, we're actually going to have like a tutorial question on this. Okay, so in a nutshell, all right, so we have like 3 case studies so far. Okay, and we can also add in Thailand. Okay, over here, under here. Okay, where the military was actually a dominant force. Okay, to the extent where it can actually override the political structure. Okay, or the democratically elected government. Okay, so therefore it's a dominant force. Okay, but on the other hand, we also have 2 examples here: Malaysia, Singapore, and later on Vietnam. Okay, where the military remained subordinated, all right, to the government. Okay, because by right the military shouldn't be part of the government. Okay, the military should be like apolitical. All right, that's a conventional rule. Okay, but in the process of what has happened in Southeast Asia after independence, right, we do see, you know, military becoming more and more politicized, all right, and playing a key role in government, which is actually what they are not supposed to be lah. But we do see that in these 3 countries. But then the military largely played their conventional role, all right, a normal role, a subordinate role, okay, in Malaysia, Singapore, and later on Vietnam. Okay, so now let's look at criterion 1 again. All right, so basically this is a litmus test for the Singapore government. Okay, so yes, we have a very positive case study of Singapore as a maximum government. Okay, but even then, they also still face some challenges. So it's not really like 100% smooth sailing for them. All right, so they saw their first setback in the 1980s. Okay, where there was a decline in popular vote. So in Singapore, we're very special. We don't have popular uprising. So we just have unhappiness manifested through our voting patterns. Okay, so therefore we are still doing it a democratic way, I guess. All right, so that's like more civilized, okay, as compared to like strikes and demonstrations, I guess. Okay, so the causes for the decline in popular votes, right, was that there was actually a mild recession. Okay, so and that's due to reasons that's not our fault. By the way, you'll be learning about the 1973 oil crisis in your paper 1 next year. Okay, and there's supposedly this graduate mother scheme is highly controversial, right? Even some of the cabinet members in PAP was like they were very outraged at it. Okay, S. Rajaratnam in particular. Okay, but this was like the brainchild of Lee Kuan Yew and Goh Keng Swee. Okay, basically they want to encourage graduate mothers to have more babies. Okay, so much so that they even considering like giving them like extra privileges, okay, and incentives. And it's kind of like not fair because, yeah, I mean, all children should be born equal, they should have same treatment. Okay, but this was Lee Kuan Yew's justification. All right, so yeah, it's totally not PC. All right, so this is totally you know, what you can say in another era. Okay, if you say it now, you'll be cancelled like immediately. Okay, so Lee Kuan Yew asked you all to think, use your brains. Okay, and yeah, he said that he doesn't want a stupid society. Yeah, so therefore, only graduate mothers should have more children, something like this. Okay, so therefore, you can imagine why a lot of people are very angry. Okay, and they became very disillusioned with PAP, and therefore, yeah, the PAP started losing support. Okay, so the manifestation of this unhappiness can be seen in the elections. So you have 3 examples where the PAP like kind of steadily lost ground lah. The worst was in 1991, okay, where they actually lost many seats. Okay, 4 seats went to 2 opposition parties. Yep. Okay, and therefore it was like a major calamity for the PAP. It was their first setback in their so-called like, yeah, smooth sailing journey towards political dominance and maximum government. Okay, so therefore one of them is Cham Si Tong in Potong Pasir. So right now we are in a very historic what do you call it, district. Okay, and there's JBJ. Okay, and this was the situation in, okay, let me see, I can't remember the date again. 1991. Okay, so that's where you actually see the SDP and WP. Okay, so they actually managed to like get some seats, and the general sentiment of PAP support. Okay, so therefore it seems as if PAP support is more popular, they're stronger here, but yeah, in East Coast they are very vulnerable. Okay, over here. Okay, so that was in 1991 before you're all born. Okay, and analysis is that, well, yeah, even in Singapore, we cannot be spared the change in prevailing conditions. So therefore, we also have like more and more students, more and more higher people who are higher educated. So therefore, they have like more demands. All right, they're more exposed to Western influences, and a lot of them are also, you know, a lot more affluent. Okay, so we're talking about the middle class, very urbanized, very educated. So nothing better to do already, right? So they have like proper jobs, and you know, they have shelter and all that. So they started thinking about wanting more. Okay, so therefore, it's another thing about like ideals, all right, and fighting for ideals and all that. Okay, so and their vote, they don't just vote for like, you know, who is going to give me my job, but we are voting for, you know, what kind of Singapore do we want. Okay, is Singapore like, you know, a place where I can get my voice heard and stuff like that, right? And they also taking a statement, okay, against the growing elitism and dominance for the PAP. Okay, so therefore this suggests that, you know, the prevailing conditions that we have witnessed in Burma, in Philippines, in Indonesia, okay, it was also the same in Singapore as well. Okay, right? So therefore, because of faced with this so-called challenge, okay, the PAP had to respond, because otherwise it will just be, you know, it's just going to be like you know, in eventual downfall, right? Just backslide, just lie down to eventually losing power, right? So obviously the PAP is not stupid, okay? So they had to do something. Okay, so the first thing Lee Kuan Yew did was that he had to step down, okay, because maybe he was too identified with like the previous way of governance already, which has done, you know, Singapore very well, okay, in the early nation building years. But now the electorate has become more mature, more educated, they have more demands. I guess they need to change, okay. So therefore, under Goh Chok Tong, okay, there was a more consultative form of governance. And the long story short was that it took like 10 years, okay, but essentially PAP was able to reverse the trend. Okay, so you can see from the statistics here that finally, you know, in 2001 they had a spectacular victory. But actually that was also because of 9/11. Yeah, a lot of Singaporeans, they were very uncertain about this new world, all right, post 9/11 world, and therefore they tend to like seek refuge in something that they are familiar with lah, okay, which was the PAP. So therefore they have like, you know, an A scorecard, all right, in 2001. Okay, so but generally we still say that is a positive lah, because they managed to reverse the trend. Okay, so how did Goh Chok Tong achieve this? Okay, again, he's also not that much of a pushover, so he also applied various strategies, both coercive and non-coercive. Okay, so let's talk about non-coercive measures. So basically it's about trying to become more consultative, trying to say that I'm with the people kind of thing, right? So he created this thing called the Singapore 21 Committee. Okay, I guess the 21 doesn't refer to 2021, okay, but more about like the 21st century, because it was formed in 1997. Okay, so focusing on the hardware for the people, so talking about heart of the people. Okay, and then he also leveraged on private sector's expertise, all right, in asking them, using their brains, like picking their brains, ideas, okay, in how to make the Singapore economy better. Okay, so it's an attempt for the Goh Chok Tong government to tap onto ground sentiments. Okay, so this thing about, you know, having such national conversations, the national committee to think about what Singapore is all about is also very common. Okay, the last time we had such a conversation, it was in 2015. Okay, well, Goh Chok Tong also said this thing called introduced this thing called OB markers. OB markers. Okay, so basically OB markers, they are a very murky area. All right, there's no like list of exactly what are these markers, what are the topics. Okay, it's kind of because the government also say it will change depending on the time and context. So they also never say. So it's very strange, right? It's like you have OB markers, but you don't know what the markers are. So then, you know, it is then up to the individual to impose like self-censorship, right? Okay, in order for them not to step on any bombshells, right? So there are the OB markers. So basically, I guess a very clear OB marker would be like, you know, you cannot talk about race and religion, perhaps. Okay, it's also part of the earlier policies, right? Like cannot question the position of the Malays, for example, because it's in our constitution already. Okay, so therefore these are some of the early ones. So that might be later. There might be others, all right, which we are not aware of until you set off this bomb. Okay, but as long as various civic groups operated within the confines of the OB markers, they were tolerated. Okay, so Goh Chok Tong wasn't too happy to use ISA all the time. Okay, no, I don't think he used ISA to suppress his political rivals. Okay, but then I think they have evolved. All right, Singapore PAP leaders have evolved. All right, they evolved to suing them. Okay, the threat of legal action. Okay, so these are 3 prominent individuals, okay, of the opposition, okay, who have experienced this. Okay, some of them have actually become bankrupt. okay, as a result of them being sued by the government, or by, not the government, but by the Prime Minister. Okay, so long story short, okay, where other SCA countries may have failed to meet the changing demands of its populace in the longer run, okay, even like Suharto's Indonesia, because remember Suharto was overthrown, okay, but somehow Singapore was like a unicorn, okay, they managed to successfully adapt its political style, right, and they are also very pragmatic, okay, they recognize that, yeah, we are a new society, we're changing, so therefore we cannot use, you know, the same old tricks, all right, in this new society. So therefore, we need to change our approach, and we need to engage the citizenry in a more consultative manner. Okay, so you contrast this with other SCA countries, you realize that it's really testament to the effectiveness of government response to popular discontent. Okay, and therefore, I think Singapore is like kind of like the only more successful case study, like, in which we're actually able to to deal with this rising discontent. Okay, so my last slide, all right, so this is a recap slide, okay, on how we can use Singapore as a maximum case study, and they're all supposed to be positive one, okay? So therefore, as a centrifugal threat, it's mostly the communists, all right? So therefore, we have the Barisan Socialists, okay, which is a political party, and they are left wing, okay, and then this left wing, right, they also infiltrate into the student bodies and the trade unions. Okay, but they're all suppressed by Operation Cold Store. Okay, popular opposition, that we don't have like uprising, a revolution. Okay, we just have, you know, yeah, us showing our dissatisfaction in terms of voting. All right. So essentially, we were the PAP government was able to suppress all this. This one through the use of ISA, which is a coercive measure, and this one through the use of like political reforms. Okay, which is a non-coercive measure. Okay, but both successful. Okay, in terms of criteria 2, okay, we also have a lot of things. Okay, so you don't have to memorize all of them, obviously. All right, so just write enough. All right, with enough details, okay, to write one paragraph, one case study, a positive case study of how a maximum government can maintain stability using democratic processes. And finally, in terms of like social economic development, the economy, we will learn more about it next year in the J2 topic. Because again, surprise, surprise, it is going to be another positive case study. All right, it's like not a coincidence, yeah. Okay, but if you want, okay, you can actually look at social stability, okay, instead of just economic stability. Okay, so social stability, okay, in terms of society, okay, we have this attempt to maintain racial harmony. All right, so in our notes, you have these 2 examples, and I guess that was enough already, because you also have examples from other case studies as well. Okay, so therefore, this will come as well. I'm at the end of the Singapore lecture.